Barren-ground caribou are an important part of Canada's northern ecosystem, yet most caribou populations are declining. Traditional knowledge describes past periods when caribou were plentiful, as well as times when the caribou did not come. Scientific surveys supplement more recent observations with the estimated number of caribou, and never before have there been so few caribou in almost all of Canada's barren-ground herds all at once. If caribou numbers become too low, what few animals remain will be unable to recover to a large population size, and as a consequence, herds could disappear. What changes may be taking place across the landscape now that weren't a factor in the past? Climate change is warming the north faster than any other part of the world, and industrial development is expanding. There are concerns that these pressures are combining to have a bigger negative impact on caribou populations than one would have on its own. As caribou move through a wide diversity of habitats, the landscape traveled today is not the same as that traveled by past generations. The range is changing. Here we present the stories of two student researchers whose work will offer insight on the various pressures facing caribou.
My name is Carolyn. Born and raised in Ontario, I love traveling across Canada's north and am particularly captivated by the tundra. When you think of how short the growing season is and all the critical life processes that plants here undergo in a few months, it's fascinating to realize that these plants, in this small window of time, provide the energy that sustains insects, animals, and people throughout an entire year. If a warming climate disrupts the plant communities, it could trigger effects up the food chain that impact large herbivores like caribou. A functioning tundra ecosystem really depends on a delicate balance being maintained, yet in many areas the vegetation is changing. This really intrigues me and is what drew me to my current PhD project. Satellite imagery shows that in the past 20 years, the growing season has gotten longer and there's more plant growth. This so-called greening is happening across the Bathurst Range, including on the tundra near treeline, an important late summer feeding area for caribou. But satellites can't tell us what exactly is changing with the plants. Historical photographs suggest northern regions are becoming shrubbier. But is this the case on the Bathurst Range? My research team spent 2 summers traveling the Bathurst Caribou's late summer range by canoe to find out whether shrub growth is changing compared with previous decades. Are there more shrubs? Are existing shrubs growing taller? Are shrubs colonizing new areas? As vegetation changes, there could be more food for caribou, or less food, because not all shrubs are edible, and large shrubs may outcompete lower growing plants that caribou prefer to eat. Tall shrubs could hide predators, shelter biting insects, or impede movement. In the field, we took measurements and collected stem samples from dwarf birch and willow, shrubs that grow upward rather than low to the ground. At the study sites we visited the first year, canopy cover was greater in areas that had greened, although density, the number of shrubs per unit of area, was unchanged. In other words, greening may be due to bigger shrubs rather than from more shrubs. It's a subtle difference. But what shrubs were present on the landscape 20, 30, 40 years ago? My research uses annual growth rings as a window to that past. Counting rings at various parts of a shrub can give us an idea of when it established and how quickly it has grown, thus providing a picture of the age distribution and growth patterns of shrubs over many years. Furthermore, by measuring ring width, we can relate good and poor growing years back to past temperature and precipitation to find out how climate may have affected growth over the lifetime of the shrub. A shrub is a book, its story of past climate and growth etched in the annual rings. And what I learned via my upcoming data analysis will help better explain vegetation change on the Bathurst Range.
Vegetation change is happening gradually over a broad area, but mines and winter roads are a noticeable localized change. Caribou tend to distance themselves from human development. How can we better understand this avoidance?
I was raised in Yellowknife, and I'm proud to be home working on my master's thesis. I'm studying how barren-ground caribou interact with an industrial winter road. Previous research has shown that caribou are affected by human disturbances within an area termed a zone of influence. A zone of influence is an area next to a disturbance within which animals may change their behavior or how they use the habitat and where they choose to go. In the Northwest Territories, scientific research has shown that barren-ground caribou, on average, use the area around diamond mines less than they use surrounding areas. The zone of influence around the mines extends out to approximately 14 kilometers. That is, caribou seem to prefer using areas further away from the mines. Roads, such as the winter road servicing the Northwest Territories diamond mine, have also been shown to create a smaller and similar zone of influence. This avoidance of mines and roads could interfere with caribou's use of the landscape. So, to better manage this relationship between caribou and mining infrastructure, it's important to understand how they interact. The Tibbet to Contoito Winter Road supports diamond mines in the Northwest Territories. It stretches hundreds of kilometers from the boreal forest outside Yellowknife to the tundra. From late January to early April, there is heavy truck traffic along the winter road to provide supplies to the mines. Its route crosses the wintering ground of the Bathurst, Blue Nose East, and Beverly barren-ground caribou herds. Caribou may need to cross the road to access food, escape predators, or during spring migration. But if caribou are being deterred by the presence of the road, this could impact behaviors that are critical to their survival. In my research, I am looking at how being near the winter road may affect caribou behavior and stress levels, as well as seeing if the road is a barrier to movement. The winter road itself is likely not particularly disturbing to caribou. I think that the level of traffic and other activity along the winter road are the factors affecting caribou behavior or stress, as well as their ability to cross the road. Throughout the winters of 2019 and 2020, my field technicians and I observed caribou and collected fecal pellets to assess stress levels. To determine how often caribou cross the road, I used satellite telemetry collar data. My early findings suggest that, on average, caribou spend more time walking when near the road and less time feeding. Stress levels in caribou were highly variable and did not indicate any clear patterns. Finally, the analysis of crossing indicates that the amount of traffic strongly affects the likelihood that caribou will cross the road. When traffic levels are high, caribou did not cross the road. There were only a few crossings during periods of low traffic. For the most part, caribou selected crossing times when there was no traffic present. These results are not the whole picture. There's still more work to be done to understand the relationship between caribou and the mining industry in the Northwest Territories. By investigating these questions, I'm helping wildlife managers from settler and Indigenous governments to identify how caribou are responding to the hypothesized zone of influence around the winter road.
As caribou ranges shift and shrink, what are the cumulative impacts of changes on the land? Might greening compound the pressures that form a zone of influence from a winter road? Just as an ecosystem is connected, so too is research. These two scientists are among many individuals working to understand recent environmental and human impacts on the land. Together, our collaborative efforts build on past knowledge, and each new insight will hopefully help caribou recover and persist for many generations to come.
Si mohi gora denitle nauhu echle le. Si hozitsi et son decini hatsita. Masi asi hatsita nahi endeke.
Masicho.